Alrighty, this next story I have is a little raw around the edges perhaps, and definitely not for kids. So if you have young ones in the vicinity, probably time to run them out. At any rate, there was this IP at this northern base in Texas once who was dating a gal from the Officers Club barbershop. Well, I don't know how long they'd been dating. The original story didn't go into those details, but apparently one night they had gone out drinking and partying, and they wound up in his BOQ room. Not unheard of. So one thing leads to another, and pretty soon they decide to get it on, as young folks would say, and they start going at it. He belonged to a flight called the Firebirds. That will become germane in the story here in a minute. So anyway, back to the story here. As they're getting it on, he decides to put her on her hands and knees, and now he's really going to go at it. So he rises up at one point, takes the palm of his hand and pops her on the ass. And he yells, "Bark for the Firebirds." And she starts howling. So he will say, "Bark for the Firebirds," and she'll go, "Ow, ow, ow, ow." And he'd smack her again, and so it went. Well, that was probably the end of it, or so she thought. Apparently, he had a tape recorder hidden under the bed and was recording it all. Okay, fine. Anyway, now move the story forward to a weather day they had at this base. The weather came in, no one was flying. And this knothead goes down to the soft desk, and he takes this tape with him, and he plays it over the intercom. That dumbass. Anyway, plays it over the intercom. Well, it takes a couple minutes, for a couple seconds, whatever, for people to figure out what's going on until they hear "Bark for the Firebirds," and they hear her howling. Well, now the whole squadron is just howling. At any rate, when you do something like this in public like this, you can expect it to get out, and in this case it did. There were these two second lieutenants in the Firebird flight, and they happened to stumble into the Officers Club barbershop later the day. And one of them couldn't help, while they were sitting there waiting, calling out, "Bark for the Firebirds." Well, she zeroed in on him, just laser focused. And she figured out what had happened. It didn't take her too long. So she left work and went over to the OSI, the Office of Special Investigation. And she went over there and reported that there was a sex tape that had been made of her and this lieutenant instructor pilot. And the only reason they made this tape was because she had been high on marijuana, or they both had been high on marijuana. Well, as you might imagine, the OSI then, they came down on this kid like crazy. They rolled him up and investigated him. He swore he wasn't doing marijuana, but they wouldn't hear anything of it. For the next 6 months, every other day, he was taking a drug test. And about wore him out. And of course, he was grounded for those 6 months. And then after 6 months, they figured it out. It was kind of a revenge thing, and they shipped him out to another base for his punishment. They sent him to Williams Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona. So he goes from North Texas to Phoenix as punishment. At any rate, bark for the Firebirds. Probably not a good idea, and I'll bet you to this day he's just glad they didn't have GoPros. See ya.